Hi, I'm Nancy Lawson. I'm the Humane Gardener, and I'm also a proud, happy volunteer for Howard County Bee City, which is a really exciting new program. And I want to talk about gardening in large spaces because there actually is a lot of land tied up in lawn in Howard County, where I live in Sykesville, in Western Howard County. And there's so much more you can do with that space. So it always frustrates me. But I know that people face some challenges with big tracts of land. I often hear, number one, the deer eat everything. Well, that's actually not true. My garden is living proof because we have herds of deer in the backyard every day. And you can see that we don't lack for plants. And number two, I often hear the space is so big. Oh, there's a lot of invasives. I don't know what to do. So I'm going to show you some strategies for filling that space affordably and using plants that are native and helpful to pollinators and other wildlife to outcompete those invasives and sort of start to shift the balance. So let's get started. Let's start at the side border of the front yard where we used to have a fence. Still have some of it when we had a dog, but we're taking it down slowly. And I bordered it with ostrich ferns, golden ragwort, a baywise sign from Howard County Master Gardeners to let my neighbors know why I'm planting this way. Environmentally friendly certification signs are really helpful for that. And along the edge here, as Julie mentioned, it's good to show some semblance of order when you can. I've got a wild garden, but I edge the borders with switchgrass, and there's some native volunteer plants here called Enchanter's Nightshade that love the moist shade. Isn't that cute? I never planted that. Attracts tiny little syrphid flies and little beetles. And then along here we've also got sea oats grasses, and you can see the common milkweed. I move it to the back field a lot, but it keeps coming up, and that's fine. It's a host plant for the monarchs that you can plant in these larger spaces. So we've got quite a lot going on here, and we'll get into the interior, but first I want to show some of the trees here. Walnut volunteered here, and we left it. It's a wonderful plant for all kinds of wildlife. Of course, the squirrels love the nuts, but Luna moths will lay their eggs on walnuts and hickories and such. And then up here, we have the staghorn sumacs. They're done flowering, but when they were flowering last week, oh wow, you could just stand under this tree and hear the buzz. And that's another thing that you can do with your larger spaces is encourage these volunteer trees and shrubs, because the pollinators really need these plants for flowers, because there are so many on a tree and shrub, often at times of year where there's not a lot of other things in flower yet. And here we've got wild senna, or rather Maryland senna, very similar plants. This is volunteered in many places. I have whole hedges of it. Sulfur butterflies lay their eggs on it, and bumblebees love the flowers. The flowers actually look like bumblebees. They're yellow and black, and quite a beautiful plant. And so we're heading inside. So these are paths that I actually will re-wood chip soon. And you might think, oh my gosh, she's got a lot of weeds in her path. But actually, these are almost all native plants. And what I do is I let them keep seeding at this time of year, and then I move them so I can start new gardens. And so I'll show you just a few that reseed a lot in the path. This is really neat little plant I got at Chesapeake Natives, and now it's all over the place. It's called blue waxweed. It'll probably get 1.5 feet tall, and the sulfur butterflies really like the flowers, and hummingbirds like the flowers. Gets little purple flowers, and it's an annual, but it reseeds, and it's almost like a little ground cover. You can kind of see a lot of it there. And another thing that reseeds a lot is Rudbeckia triloba. That is a cool plant. It's right here, more mature, and it is quite a prolific reseeder, kind of a biennial, but it'll come back all the time, even more, because it reseeds so much. And I saw American snout butterflies on it last year, and a monarch chrysalis monarch trust decided to make her chrysalis on there. And so we've got some just huge mixture of wildflowers here over just the past few years. I mean, a lot of this part used to be turf, and so it can kind of show you what you can do pretty quickly. You don't have to have 20 years. Some of our garden is that old, but a lot of it isn't. This is golden ragwort, as Julie mentioned. Wow, look at what a great native ground cover this makes. Better than hostas, because it actually has flowers that, again, feed those little specialist bees who rely on certain native plants. Depending on the species of bee, they have interactions with certain native plants to gather the pollen of those plants to feed their young. And when these flowers go to seed, as you can see they already have, they make fluffy seed heads that hummingbirds will collect for their nests, goldfinches will collect. I've seen them stuff their mouths with it. This is Possumhaw viburnum. What I see oftentimes on here are beetles. I'm forgetting the name right now, but it's wonderful to watch those little guys. They're also pollinators, covered in pollen when I see them. And here we have some patches of Joe pieweed and wild bergamot that has reseeded everywhere, and it's gets this lavender firecracker flower that so many butterflies go for, and bumblebees, and it's just kind of a pollinator bonanza that deer don't eat because it's scented. We've got some common evening primrose, and I leave these plants because the deer and rabbits will eat them along the edges, and then they'll put out fresh new leaves, and so they'll just flower later. And then they don't eat some that are more in the interior of a garden, and the bumblebees and carpenter bees and just a lot of other pollinators. The moths come to these plants because they flower in the morning and at night, and then of course you get the bats who want to eat the moths. And so it's a great plant for all kinds of wildlife, and could be a deterrent plant. Again, when you got those mammals browsing, you can have it on the edge. This is a swamp sunflower. Oh, this is just an incredible plant that blooms quite late and has quite a lot of late season pollinators, sweat bees and such, who still need flowers in October. And you know, often around here they just don't have them anymore. This is Canada anemone, and it already flowered. This is going to be a great ground cover. There's a whole bunch of it in here. I just planted it last year. It has cute little white flowers. This is a red bee balm that has just started flowering, and it's a great hummingbird plant because of those red tubular flowers, and it also helps to cover the ground. This is a spot where I decided 2-3 years ago to stop mowing. I never wanted to mow anyway, and my husband usually did it, but I use a real mower in these small spaces. I started to really worry about animals in the violets that were coming up. Fritillary butterfly caterpillars lay their eggs on these. Fritillary butterflies lay their eggs on these violets. I've seen them actually doing it. And then, you know, the caterpillars in spring will turn into butterflies after overwintering. So let's try not to mow them down. So what started to happen was I also started to see that native grass I mentioned earlier called nimblewill. And it's grown throughout this spot. This used to be turf and Japanese stiltgrass. As you can see, there's just a few stilt grasses here and there left. And there's a big difference here between stilt grass and nimblewill. Easy to tell apart. I often hear people say they look the same. Once you get to know them though, they don't. The stilt grass has these much wider leaves and they just have a different habit. You can see that's all nimblewill. All nimblewill. And it makes this nice quote unquote line. Walking around to get to the elderberry. I don't want to stick around here too long because there's birds nesting in that bluebird box. I'm not sure if they're bluebirds. I'll find out later. I can come back and sit a while. This is a native plant garden. Well, they're all native plant gardens, but this one is a really early one I started. And maybe 20 years ago to kind of control the runoff. I just started planting things along the driveway, and you can see we've got the elderberry, which again is a nice little, here's a little guy just waking up, maybe a syrphid fly on the elderberry flowers. And then we've got bottle brush grass over here, kind of toward the back. The rains have carried it down. Isn't that a beautiful grass? Grasses are great host plants for skippers, moths. They're a great cover for pollinators. So they tend to be overlooked when people think of just the flowers. And we've got the common milkweed here, and we've got the bone set, and that's a wonderful late flowering plant, and it attracts wasps and flies and butterflies and bees and oh my gosh, you name it. It's really quite a fantastic plant. It's tall, so again, tall plant for a large garden. You can have them in a small garden, but you can really let them take off. This is a plant that volunteered here. I never planted it. Now it's in almost all of my gardens. This is obedient plant Julie showed you earlier. This is how it's going to be if you let it spread. Perfect for this makeshift rain garden that I made. And more wing stem that seeded itself after I planted a few. And this is a plant I transplanted here this year. Now, here's a great example of a plant that the deer don't eat. It's called aromatic aster. Late flowering. So again, great for those remaining pollinators, or the ones who hatch in the fall or who are migrating through. And because it's aromatic, the deer do not like it. They've never eaten this one. Now, never say never. Sometimes they nibble on things they're not supposedly interested in, but those things grow back. I've never had them eat a plant down to the ground. They might eat it in half and it'll just flower later, and then those plants get those chemical defenses oftentimes that protect them on the second flush of growth. This is a cone flower, echinacea. It's going to flower soon. The butterflies are going to come here like crazy. Okay, so that's the front garden. That's a sassafras grove that, again, there's locust, there's hickory, there's sassafras, trees that I never planted. Into the back, you can see this very large patch of Virginia roses and shrubby St. John's wort. And you can hear our mini tree frogs. They love it after all the rain. And Virginia roses are almost done blooming, but you know, if you've got the space, they spread like crazy. The bumblebees love them, and it's great at this time of year again because they need to have more flowers than sometimes the perennial choices offer them at this time of year. So let's head into some more of the backyard by way of the deck. This is coral honeysuckle vine, and it is a bonanza for hummingbirds and bees, and birds and chipmunks eat the berries, and hummingbird moths. Look at this little guy. Hummingbird moths eat the leaves as caterpillars, and then they fall down among the leaves and overwinter there. So that's a really important reason to leave your leaves. So check this little fella out. He is actually nectar robbing. So instead of, because he can't fit himself into those long tubes, too skinny for his little fat, cute furry body, he goes to the end of the tubes and he just gets nectar easy way. He kind of steals it. He nectar robs, which means he's taking some nectar, but he's not actually pollinating. That's okay. Hummingbirds come there and they pollinate. So heading down to the patio. This is a nice, cool space that was once turf. Everything was turf. And it has these incredible sassafras trees that suckered from this one plant many years ago. And the leaves feed spicebush swallowtail caterpillars. So we've got lots of spicebush swallowtail butterflies. Oh, what is this called? Jewel-winged damselfly. Ebony jewel-winged damselfly, I think. Right here on this Carolina allspice. So you can see those flowers in the back, and they're actually good flowers for beetles to pollinate. And beetles are wonderful ancient pollinators. They like those bowl-shaped flowers that they can get into. So this little guy is having a great time here. Isn't he quite beautiful? So let's go around to the back, where I'd like to show you my, what I call the meadow garden, and it's in the shadow of a tree that died, so more light has been opened up. This is tufted hairgrass. I showed you some by the mailbox in the front, but wow, look at how beautiful that is. These silvery flower heads, and syrphid flies come to these flowers and they get nutrients. So that's quite a wonderful cover too. We had rabbits nesting in here this spring, and I leave the black raspberries sometimes along pathways. This will need to be cut so we don't poke ourselves, but the deer actually usually prune this back for us. And for the same reason, here's some evidence. You can see why I leave some of the volunteer goldenrods. This was chewed off by deer, and this one too. And if you leave these along a path, you know, you might be able to use them as deterrents for nibbling on your other plants. They just kind of get what they need as they wander along. Actually, you can see that right here. where they've had a good time there. So again, some more of that wild bergamot. I forgot to mention earlier that I planted seeds of these. I started with maybe 6 or 12 many years ago, and that's how I have them. This is an elephant's foot. Neat little plant that can become a ground cover, and it has little purple flowers late in the season that I've seen a lot of butterflies on, some of the little skippers and such. This is eastern woodland sedge, Carex blanda. Oh my gosh. So this is just absolutely wonderful because it volunteered here. This whole area used to be turf and Japanese stiltgrass just last year. And then I started noticing the violets and the Carex blanda, and I just started pulling plants around it that I didn't want, like the turf and the stiltgrass, and leaving all the natives, and then planting some stuff in there. And now it's become this pollinator bonanza that you can see the tall plants are the bone set that I mentioned earlier. There's swamp milkweeds throughout here. So these are just about to bloom. And of course, those are host plants for monarch butterflies, but lots of other bees and such come to them. And we've got golden alexanders, penstemons, some more of that solidago or dora. I've got agastache. A good plant for pollinators, and the deer don't like that because it's scented. Here's something that I leave. Call me crazy, but I leave some of these wild lettuces because, as you can see, they get nibbled too. And they're usually native. I can't figure out what this one is actually, because it had some really neat basil leaves last year that don't match anything. See in the path, here's some fleabanes I'm going to move. I often do that, and I often talk about fleabanes because this is one of these plants that people treat as weeds, and it's a native plant, and it hosts specialist bees with its pollen. So they gather pollen, you know, if they specialize on this plant, only from this plant to provision their nests. And it just feeds other bees too, and it's just so cute, and you can make whole patches of it, and it volunteers. I never planted this. And the rabbits and the deer, they'll eat it about halfway down sometimes. It's a nice little salad, and then it'll resprout anyway. So a lot of them have gone to seed for now, like this one, but they are quite lovely for so much wildlife. Penstemons almost done. I've seen bumblebees sleep underneath. That's what male bumblebees do at night a lot of times. They'll sleep underneath the flowers, then wake up, go inside the flower, and start drinking again. Little bachelor pads. So this is a great plant for bumblebees. It'll start falling down. But you know, area like this, I just leave it because it'll reseed and then I'll have more. Okay, here's another situation where there's been some nibbling. This is cardinal flower. Now, this was nibbled. I had 3 of them. I still do. See this tall one here in the spring. And I planted them last fall. They got nibbled by half, and then they put out this new flush of growth. You can see someone came by and tried again, and they were like, I don't really like it, and they moved on. If you're familiar with mountain mint, you know what I mean when I say you will learn new insects that you've never seen. There are so many on here, from common buckeyes to, I can't remember the name of this little blue butterfly at the end of the season. Oh, maybe common checkered skipper, and just leafcutter bees and sweat bees and all kinds of creatures. And so then we've got the eastern woodland sedge lining the edges. And, you know, that sort of got burnt this year. I think it wasn't used to so much sun, and you can see it doesn't matter. It had this stuff here, and it put out new growth in the middle, and it's just quite beautiful, edging a border. And I had never heard of this sedge until it popped up on its own in our garden. And we've got switchgrass back there, and Culver's root, and woodland sunflower, Joe pieweed, ironweed. I can see some nibbling on the ironweed over there. No matter, it's just going to keep putting out new growth. Plus, it reseeds like crazy, so there's quite a lot of them. There's a nice patch of purple lovegrass. What a gorgeous grass. Oh my gosh, look at that. You can't tell just how pretty it's going to be when they really start flowering. We'll go in the back. There's a red bud. Julie mentioned, oh yes, the leaf cutter bees love the leaves, and then the bumblebees love the flowers. So this is a common milkweed field near our clothesline. I have to keep kind of moving them because my husband hangs up the clothes and is like, okay, I need a little space. But we're both really excited about this because this is a space that's just begging to be, taken over by wildflowers. And we have lots and lots of trees and bushes. They're caged back there to protect them from the browsing. Once they get big enough, they'll be fine. We can take the cages off. So this is a bumblebee, of course. I don't have to tell you that. Lots of ants too on the, oh, that's not an ant. That's a little tiny bee, I think. But there are usually lots of ants on the common milkweed. Okay, so let's just head back toward this woodland because I want to show you just some really interesting stuff with the natives that you can use to compete with some of the invasives. So, okay, here's a really neat example. I left some stiltgrass in here. First of all, this is mostly sea oats, river oats, Chasmanthum latifolium, although there is some stiltgrass in there. And this is a sea oat, or sometimes called northern river oats here. And this is stiltgrass. So this is one that can be a little bit trickier when it comes up, when you're like, I am not sure what I'm pulling. But the leaves of the stiltgrass are just sort of thinner, wimpier. They feel different, and they actually look different. I mean, they always have sort of these three at the top. I'm not a botanical expert. I've tried. It's not the way my brain works, but visually, I can get used to how these sort of look, and then I pull these. The other thing is there's all this wonderful nimblewill at the edge of the path, and it also competes with the stiltgrass. So I've been working on this for a couple years. I've really gotten a big gain on the invasives here. Oh my gosh, the sea oats are already about to flower. So what's neat about these, besides how beautiful they are, and they have these seeds in the fall that sort of make gentle noise in the wind, is that they are host plants. So the northern pearly eye butterfly hosts on there, and I'm sure some other pollinators too that I've forgotten right now. Okay, so I think this is wrinkle-leaf goldenrod, which volunteered in the back field, and I've replanted it other places. Some more ostrich fern, and this is all on its own. This fabulous woodland came together. Not all on its own, but I mean, these trees were entirely planted, not by me. This is pokeweed, American pokeweed. Anyone who knows me knows I proselytize about pokeweed. It's a host plant for the leopard moth, giant leopard moth, and feeds hummingbirds and all kinds of wildlife, mammals with its berries. This is nimblewill. See how it makes this wonderful edge? And there's only just a few Japanese stiltgrasses that I have to pull. Okay, let's go here just real quick through the woodland path. These will get a little taller, and then I won't need to cut the branches so I can walk. Okay, this is just an area where it used to be an old vegetable garden, and I'm encouraging the sumacs that are coming up. Again, great plant for early spring pollinators, also for birds in the fall. You can see them hanging down here. This is a pond that we just started. Work in progress. I got sick when we were just about to lay the rocks, but there are already frogs living in here and dragonflies that fly over it. And we've always had, not always, just the last few years. These. Oh, hello. Oh, hi. Sounds like our green frog. He must be somewhere in there, but they're pretty good at going along the edges where I can't see them. Ooh, where are you, little buddy? Where are you, little buddy? Well, hello. Hello. Okay. So, and this is really neat. These are little ponds that we made. There's some more nimble. Isn't that just so pretty? And then we've got these just incredible patches of clearweed. This is a native plant too. It's an annual, a native ground cover, and it likes the shade and the moisture. So all these tulip poplars that volunteered here, it really gets along with well. And I just nurture what's in here, and this is all native plants. There's a few little stilt grasses left, but other than that, we got it going on back here now. Okay, what else? I wanted to show you one more thing here, which is that there is a hackberry that volunteered. Okay, so hackberries are the host plant for American stout butterflies and hackberry emperor butterflies. And what's really quite interesting about this is that I started seeing American snout butterflies last year, and I was like, I don't know where he came from because my neighbor's lawns are all mowed and I don't have a hackberry. Well, it turned out I had about 5 hackberries. I probably have more that just volunteered and I didn't know it.